even things that are valuable, like family and job and even there's something good about being comfortable, even if you're not completely honest about your gender, being comfortable in a world that values being the gender that you were born as, that says, well, if you can live in that, then that's the way we want you to be, and really want to support you in that. That's how, at least in my day, it started, at least for me and people my age. I understand obstetricians do it differently these days, but back then it was a good, sound, round slap on the rump. And that's the beginning of life, the first breath drawn. As the doctor makes that first announcement, the first name that is given to us, before any other name, and we are called boy or girl. I was born in a snowstorm in March, which not unusual in Buffalo, and I was the firstborn on both sides of my family, so it was a big deal for everyone. I was the oldest, and the fact that I was a grandson to my grandparents was a very big deal. But moved to Georgia when I turned 10. But there it is, and that name, boy or girl, that follows us. It haunts the rest of our life, or it gives joy to the rest of our life, depending on which way your journey will take you. I left high school with the idea that I was going to be an electrical engineer.
Oh.
So I went to Georgia Tech.
Oh, you went to Georgia Tech?
Yes.
Okay.
People sometimes find out that I went to Tech in 1965 and say, well, gosh, there weren't very many women at Georgia Tech in 1965. And I get to say, no, there weren't, and I wasn't one of them. There is a congregation full of names. Look around you and look at all the wonderful people who are here, and imagine all of the names that have been given joyfully in birth to boys and girls. And then there are some of us for whom that name becomes something awkward and strange, something that we have to try to live up to, try to imagine ourselves as being, and we struggle and wrestle and try to express that as best we can, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, and sometimes even for a lifetime. I did 2 years of an electrical engineering degree, and it was a pretty tough time for me for lots of personal reasons. I became very depressed. I had been struggling with a gender identity issue since I was 10.
Since you were 10.
And that, plus the pressures of the education and trying to live up to people's expectations, I really became quite depressed at the age of 20. And I actually left Georgia Tech without telling my parents. Applied to Davidson. Couldn't get in because of the timing. It was too late to get in for the next year, so I applied to Georgia State as a transient student, and then went off to church camp for the summer to just get away from everything, because I'd been doing engineering work during the summers, and but I wanted to get away completely, so I went to the Presbyterian church camp, and I think in many ways it was probably the best decision that I made in my life to go to that camp that summer, because that's where I met Sigrid,
Who became your wife?
Who became my wife, and I realized that the calling to ministry that I had had probably years before, because the calling to ministry for me was something that sort of emerged out of my transgender experience. I can't tell you how it happened. I can't tell you why it happened at 10. I can give you some ideas. I mean, at 10 years old, you're beginning to become aware of a larger world around you. At 10 years old, remember, it's the 4th or 5th grade. It's the time when the first buds of adolescence begin to blossom in the lives of especially the girls, because they tend to be a little earlier than the boys. So those things are beginning to happen, and for many of us, it was the first time that we were ever alone.
Both parents were working, and both sisters were in split sessions in a different school, and I locked every door in the house, double-checked every door in the house, went into the powder room, locked the powder room door. I mean, I was really locked in, and pulled gobs of toilet paper off of the toilet paper roll and stuck them in my t-shirt to make breasts. And looked at myself in the mirror, and it just, the most mixed up, awesome feeling just came over me. I couldn't describe it. I felt a mixture of shame and awe, and it made no sense to me, what I was doing or why I was doing it. I've since learned that my classmates were all doing the same things. The girls were going home and doing that because they were anticipating the growth of their breasts. And the boys were going and doing it, but they were not doing it by themselves like I was. They were doing it with the other little boys because they were making fun of the girls whose breasts were developing. So, we all had exactly the same experience, but for different reasons. The thing that happened, though, was I found myself really swept up in this powerful sense that I wanted to grow up to be a woman. I knew that I wasn't. I mean, I was a pretty bright kid. It was 1957, and we were living in Georgia, and I was smart enough to know that I better not say anything about that to anybody. So I kept it to myself. But it was a very hard thing to hold on to for a 10-year-old. I believed at the time, because I'd never heard of anyone say anything to me that indicated that anyone else in the world ever had a feeling like that. It was like, this was a unique idea, that a little boy could want to grow up to be a woman was something I never heard of from anywhere. And so I really thought that I was broken. I thought that there was something basically wrong with me. And that if people found out, that I would be lost. So I'd better keep it a secret.
When a newspaper article appeared in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the headlines of which said, "Ex-Marine becomes bride," and I knew immediately what it meant, and read the story of someone who had gone through, served his time as a Marine, undergone sex reassignment surgery in Denmark. No, I guess his was in Morocco, and had become a woman, and the account was of her wedding dress and all. I was transfixed by the story. I suddenly had a new name, one that I dare not speak, but one that I held and I kept carefully. I wrapped it up in a piece of foil. We didn't have plastic back then. And I wrapped it in foil. I put it on the end of an electrical wire and hung it in the wall in my bedroom behind the intercom, which I removed for the purposes of hiding it, terrified that anyone would find it because it would immediately give me away. I think it's still there.
It was about the same time that my family started attending a little Presbyterian church about 4 blocks away from the house. The pastor's name was Harold Miner, and the director of Christian education was Willeen Terry. Very significant people in my life. They both had a universal message that was the sort of the core of their ministry for this little church that was brand new. It was a satellite church from a big church here in Atlanta. And the message was this, that one, that God knows you all the way through to the very marrow of your bones. There is nothing about you that God doesn't know about. which of course to someone like me would have been a devastating thing to hear, except that the other part of the message was, and God loves you all the way to the very marrow of your bones. With every secret you have, God embraces you.
So he knows everything about you and he still loves you.
Not just still loves you, really loves you.
Really loves you. Really loves
It's not like he loves you in spite of this.
you. Right.
It's that it's who you are and you are who God loves.
Mm-hmm.
It was an unusual message, I have to tell you, for the South, for Georgia. You know, this happened to be the Presbyterian church just down the street from where we lived that was convenient to go to. You know, God works in mysterious ways, and I'm just certain that God was guiding all of the things that were making that happen, because it was a saving message for me. You know, I still felt like I was broken. You know, I still felt like I was unlike other kids, but I didn't feel lost. You know, that was a fundamental difference for me. I knew that there was a place that I belonged in the world, and the church was it. So, you know, in a sense, I've often thought that I didn't have much choice in the matter of becoming a Presbyterian minister, and I did try the engineering thing for a couple of years. But when I went to Camp Calvin, which is what it was at the time, good Presbyterian camp, you know, John Calvin, experiencing myself working with the campers there was just an overwhelming sense of being in place. I was just in the right place. And there was always this kind of motivation inside of me that was you know, I felt an incredible amount of pain about myself, and I was intuitive enough to know that other people felt that too. And it wasn't my pain, but I knew that kids felt, you know, I was sensitive to shy children and kids who struggled with disabilities or a problem that made them stand apart from the other kids. And so, you know, it was, I was highly motivated to work with and be a part of their lives and try to help them. And so, you know, being a helper became sort of ingrained in me. A beautiful, bright, strong woman. She came out of the woods. Can you imagine that? She really honestly came out of the woods at a church camp like an Indian princess, and there she was, and I fell head over heels, absolutely, unbelievably, and for all of my life, in love with her. I fell in love. And I had, one of the things that I had sort of comforted myself with through adolescence was this idea that that probably all boys wanted to be girls. That, you know, that this was a universal boy thing, that they really wanted to be girls, and the secret was that it was a secret, you know, so that nobody talked about it at all. So it was something that was just there, but it was so taboo that nobody would ever say anything. So there was this thing. And then what happened is, when you fell in love with a girl, and of course this was in 1957, being gay was, I'd never even heard of being gay. You know, I knew transgender stuff long before gay stuff. So, you know, I never heard of being gay. So the idea of falling in love with a boy just didn't ever occur to me. But it did, you know, falling in love with a girl, what would happen was, when I fell in love, all these feelings of wanting to be a woman would become part of our connection with each other. So in a kind of a Jungian way, you know, this projection of my female persona onto my partner would be a part of the intertwining of our psyches. And, you know, it was very sophisticated for a teenager. I thought, you know, I'd never heard of Jung, so, you know, I came up with that all on my own. And I met Sigrid, and I mean, I really did. I fell in love hard, and she was and is an amazing woman, and to me, I mean, she's it. And I really, actually it worked. I stopped having all of this desire to be a woman. It lasted probably about 9 months, long enough for us to get married. And then about 3 months after our wedding, there I was standing in front of the mirror in our bedroom, dressed in her clothes, and it was a devastating experience. It was just incredible because, you know, not only was I not cured, I had now connected my life to someone else whom I loved. I just loved her, still do.
Did she talk about? Did you share any of this with her, or you didn't?
I became very depressed. So much so that she was worried. She wanted me to see a counselor. She was afraid that I was suicidal. I might have been, actually. I was despondent. I couldn't stand the possibility of losing her, and I knew that if I said anything to her, that I would. It was...
But you went on to have 2 daughters together.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And you were married for 27 years.
27 years.
So how did...
And we celebrated our 40th anniversary in December of '07. So this December we'll celebrate our 42nd wedding anniversary.
42nd wedding anniversary.
Although we've been divorced for...
well, how did you get from the beginning of your marriage to 20